Welcome back to Love, Growth, and Narratives. I'm Freddy.
And I'm Tiffany.
In this 15th episode, we discuss the weight of it all, battling obesity together. The weight loss journey of both of us has really been a roller coaster, and one that neither one of us has been able to get off of yet. And so we will discuss that during this episode. But before we get started, Tiffany, you got some housekeeping?
I do. And by the way, I do not like roller coasters. So thank you so much for following, sharing, and listening to our podcast. We encourage you to keep sharing our podcast so that new listeners can benefit from some of the conversations that we have. Please continue to send messages. I know some of you said you tried to post on the individual apps, but you couldn't, so you sent it to our Instagram or to my personal Instagram. Our Instagram, by the way, is at Love, Growth, and Narratives Podcast. So you should be able to find us easily. We're going to get a Facebook going as well. But please, once again, please share, follow, thumbs up, comment, all that good stuff. Rate, all of it.
And real quick, I do want to give a special shout out to all the folks who have come up to us, who've called us, who've sent us messages about how our podcast has brought value to their life.
Yes.
So we really do appreciate that. So with that out the way, let's go ahead and jump into the episode where we talk about our own individual battles with obesity. So Tiffany, how were you as a child in terms of your weight, your perceived weight, how you saw yourself, things of that nature?
I think I started out small, but there was always that potential to gain weight. And I guess you could always see it there.
Right.
And when I grew up in a home with my grandparents and my mom, especially before we moved out on our own, there was always candy in a dish. There was always ice cream in the freezer. And there was also always a sugary cereal on the shelf. And so that was available to me at all times.
Yes.
And eventually, probably around 10, 11 years old, that whole I can eat whatever I want and not gain weight started to slip away.
Wow, at 10?
At 10.
Oh, that's tough.
I started to get pudgy. Because I was really, really overdoing it and not moving enough. And then you go get a little bit older and you're playing some sports at school. I mean, and when I say a little bit older, I mean 12. I started playing basketball just at recess, and it started to fall off again. So, I always had I can gain and I can lose pretty quickly in both areas. Ever since I can remember, that was an issue for me. And I didn't play any sports in high school. I mean, I think I was somewhat just naturally physically active in the sense that we didn't have a car, so we had to walk or take the bus and what have you. And I was pretty active with my friends in terms of we got out and we did things. We weren't stuck in front of screens like kids are today, but I definitely didn't grow up learning that exercise, intentional exercise was important.
The way I was as a child, I was a really skinny kid. I could eat anything I wanted, as much as I wanted, and stay skinny. Now, some of that, of course, could be attributed to how active I was. I was, at some points, an obsessive basketball player. Never a great basketball player, but I was a pretty good pickup playground basketball player, and I enjoyed it. Unfortunately, being 5'8", the level of skill I would have needed to take it a little bit further just didn't ever arrive. But I love to play basketball. Sometimes we would play football on the playground, and even younger than that, kickball and all those different types of things. So I was a pretty active kid. And I would also walk to different neighborhoods to play basketball. And so just the walk there and then playing and everything. And then I went into the Army at 17, like we had spoke of, and I was probably 150 pounds at the most when I went into the Army. And I stayed fairly slim most of my time in the Army. And I think when I came out of the Army, I was probably around 180. So I was still pretty slim, but I felt like I was getting big. But it was around that time I was starting to see that I can't eat all the things that I want to. You know, I could still eat pretty well, but I was starting to feel like, okay, something's not working for me right now.
Right.
And it seemed like maybe within 3 or 4 years of getting out of the Army, I was huge. I mean, I probably went from 180 to at least 225 in 3 years.
Wow.
And then from there, it just kept ballooning up. And I actually got up to 280 pounds twice in my adulthood, which is interesting because both the times were the times that both of my sons were born.
Oh, wow.
I didn't blow up for my daughter, who was my first child. But I mean, I did get really big. But for both of my sons that were 10 years apart, I blew up to, 280 plus.
Wow, interesting.
And it was crazy because these things would happen. I would, go into the bathroom and, you take your clothes off to get in your shower and you're like, wow, oof, this is not good. And then, you're out of breath trying to tie your shoes and all. And it was horrible, but it was it took a while for it really to hit home with me that I can't do all the things that I want to do, eat all the things that I want to eat. And so it, for whatever reason, it took some years for it to really hit home. What about you as you got older?
Well, interesting. I think I stopped at, as a pretty young child when I was talking earlier, but when I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about my journey to reaching my highest weight and what took place during that time, one of the things that I believe contributed to my issue with weight is body image. So when I was younger, there was a lot of focus on getting into those skinny jeans, Jordache, Vanderbilt, and, so on, Calvin Klein's. I was obsessed with Brooke Shields and, getting into those jeans and having that look. So I think I dabbled with eating and not eating and restricting myself way back before I knew really what I was doing. I knew that I wanted to look somewhat like the people on TV and that I was into models and I wanted to be a model. Fast forward a little bit to right out of high school, I think not moving as much, not just walking or taking the bus to school every day, hanging out with my friends and starting to get a job and starting to drive a car, then I was moving less, but I was still eating the same.
Yeah.
Plus, I started down the road of emotional eating, and I gained quite a bit of weight. I don't even know what that highest number was at that time. I just remember that in my 30s, I was pretty heavy, and I went through a little weight loss journey during that time. But by the time I hit 40, that was when I also reached my highest weight, which was 284. And I really believe that all the habits that I had learned prior to that from childhood and the images about my body and what to eat and a love-hate relationship with food brought me to that place. On top of genetics.
Can I cut you off real quick? I'm sorry. But one of the things, because we're about the same age, in the 90s, for a man to be heavy, there was no consequence in terms of, there was really no one putting you down for being really big in the 90s that I could remember. And back then in the 90s, it was in style to wear 2X, 3X, and sometimes 4X clothing.
Right.
But I would imagine for women, it didn't work out that way.
No, absolutely not. I mean, it was okay to get a little bigger and, what they call slim fit or slim thick nowadays. Right. But that still was very much on the smaller side, very much so. And so I'm not sure it's ever really all the way in fashion. I think being thicker in the right places and small in the right places has become extremely popular, and maybe we're more accepting of the average size woman, but we still have a long way to go in terms of how it impacts every aspect of our life. If you're overweight. And as a person who's been both overweight and what's considered normal size, or an acceptable size, I should say, there's a drastic difference in just how strangers treat you, let alone what's shown in the media. I mean, just people holding the door for you is different, or the elevator. Huge difference. Just will they even go next to you if you're at the gym and you're on the machine, will they go next to you, or will they skip a machine? You'll see them go next to certain people and others they won't. This perceived notion, especially if you're a woman who's overweight, that you're unhappy and you don't love yourself, and that could be true, but that could also be false.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a big difference in how heavy women were accepted over the years. I mean, when the supermodels were big, now every day that we don't even have supermodels anymore, right? Now it's like, singers and actresses are modeling as well. But when we're talking about the Christy Brinkley's and all the popular models, it was all about trying to look like that. And I guess fast forward to a more current time, it was kind of the Kardashians. But, we find that females are always trying to mimic what society feels is an acceptable size. Yeah. For me, myself, I grew up with a lot of people who are a lot smaller than me, smaller frame. Like, a lot of my friends were Asian, so they have smaller frames. And so I automatically seemed big, even if I wasn't necessarily.
You're right.
My height, my weight, I was just thicker. So I always felt like I needed to shrink and be smaller so I didn't appear so large, even though I wasn't necessarily overweight. That's how it kind of translated, and that's how it felt. And I think I used to hunch more, and I still do because of that. And in many other ways, I would shrink myself because I didn't want to seem big based on just how I looked.
That's interesting, because during this same time, I go back to the 90s. I think of Heavy D, Chub Rock, Big Pun. I mean, it was actually okay, to be a bigger guy. Not so much now.
Well, they still get you, a teddy bear. I forget what the new names are, but there is a name for that. There's still that acceptability.
But it's not as accepted as it was in the 90s. In the 90s, it was almost cool to be on the bigger side, have the bigger clothes and all of that kind of stuff. But I know it was never healthy, but I know at least in public opinion, for me, I didn't suffer the same consequence that you did.
Right.
Not even close.
Right.
Not even close.
Right.
So when you started down or first off, what led you to say enough is enough? And then how did you go about getting rid of it all?
Well, actually, I had so many moments of saying enough is enough. I mean, I lost weight with diet pills. I lost weight with shots. I lost weight drinking things. I lost weight not eating, everything you could think of. I went to Jenny Craig. I did Overeaters Anonymous, and all of those things worked for a period of time. But eventually, on my 100th try at losing weight, I decided to do it with diet and exercise. Really exercise. I'll say I started there with exercise, and it came about because of one of the many times I was trying to lose weight. I joined a boot camp style, going in the park, and I just could not keep up. I was just huffing and puffing. I was the worst in the group, regardless of size and age. And I felt like I couldn't believe how out of breath that I was getting. So I decided to go to the doctor, and he sent me to a cardiologist who found that my heart was enlarged, that there was some blockage in the arteries, that my blood pressure was really high. And I remember him saying to me, and I'll talk about how it came back around full circle, but he said to me, you're fat. You are probably always going to be fat, so you're never going to get off, blood pressure medication. And I think that, coupled with the many times I tried to lose weight, I was like, I'm going to get it off this time. So move a little bit forward from that. A friend of mine from junior high, she belonged to a really fancy gym at the time called Sports Club LA. They got bought out by Equinox. But she was like, here's a 1 week pass. And when I say fancy, I mean fancy. Like there was no reason to even go home, honestly. So, I mean, there was cable on the machines and they had a pool, Olympic sized pool, you name it, a spa, everything there. So I did that 1 week, loved it, and decided I'm going to join this gym, which at the time was considered very expensive because there wasn't Equinox then. So this gym was over $200 a month. And so I said, I'm going to join this. I'm going to get rid of my cable because they have cable here in the machines. And I'm just going to spend most of my time here at the gym. And I started with just doing a ton of cardio, thinking about what that doctor said. I did not want to be on medication. That at the time was the only medication that I was on. And I did a ton of cardio. And I mean, when I say a ton, I mean a ton. Every single day I was there for a couple of hours, just every machine. And I could see that the weight was coming off. It was coming off. What hadn't really changed to what I was eating yet. It was 40 and it was still coming off. So I was like, okay, I can still eat what I want to eat and just exercise more. At that point, that's what my mindset was. Then I eventually lost, I don't know, maybe 50 pounds of the 128 that I had eventually lost at the end of my journey, not the end of the journey, but before I got the skin removal surgery. So after doing all of that cardio, and I lost about 50 pounds, I was coming across different trainers who would always see me at the gym and they're like, you need to do weights. And I didn't want to. I kept thinking I'm going to get big, that's what everyone says as a woman. And it was like, no, you need to do weights. And once I did weights, it completely shifted my body and I became more of a weights person and stopped doing as much cardio. My body completely changed and people actually thought that I was losing weight faster. Like I must be starving myself, but I wasn't.
Right.
It was that change in the shift between fat to muscle, or muscle to fat to muscle. Yeah. Right. So anyway, when I started doing that, it became like my life, night and day. When I saw the results, when I reached a plateau, I decided to add in changing my diet, restricting things, taking out sugar, taking out certain carbs, meal prepping. I knew that it was important. What I ate was going to be the difference between me seeing my body go to the next level. Now, keep in mind, during this whole time, my goal was to look a certain way.
Yes.
I wanted to get off the blood pressure pills. That was initially what got me going. But most of that journey was all about me trying to have a certain look.
Right.
And that was not a good focus.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I worked against myself, which brings me to say that people think if they lose weight, like they're going to feel better about themselves, or people think that people are overweight are all unhappy. And if they lose the weight, everything's going to change. I'm here to tell you, not necessarily. Yeah. Not in my case. I still was very unhappy. I still was not in the best relationships. I still didn't have the best relationship with food. And I still didn't like my body. I have ended up losing 128 pounds naturally. And I still felt like I wanted a certain shape, basically an hourglass shape, which my body does not naturally look like. And I still looked at myself, and I think I was looking at myself more critically at a smaller weight than I was at a larger weight.
Yeah.
Because I just felt like, oh, it's not enough, or, oh my gosh, now you're losing too much. You need to build it back up. I mean, it just was a really difficult time in my life where all I thought about every day was how I looked, what I ate. Yeah. And that's it. And food, it began to be something I didn't really enjoy. I just looked at it as carbs, protein, fat.
Just as fuel.
That's it. Taste didn't matter. I stopped using salt, which I needed to, obviously, if I had high blood pressure. But I just let go of a lot of the enjoyment of food and meal prepping. I was making the same things every day, eating the same thing and just feel like Doesn't matter what it tastes like. Doesn't matter. You already had your fun time with food. That's why you got fat and all of that. And I stopped eating red meat for 12 years. I stopped drinking for over a year.
And you were a lot of fun with your friends when y'all would go out to eat, huh?
Oh, yes. I mean, that's the other thing. You meet your fitness friends versus your just regular friends, and it's a huge difference because your fitness friends all thinking like you are actually, right? What you drink, what you eat, you got to get up in the morning, how much sleep you need, all of that. Where your friends who are not in that fitness world, it's like, why can't we stay out and party all night? You know, they didn't understand that I had to go to the gym by a certain time and I had to get enough sleep in order to do it, or that I wouldn't eat the piece of cake, or that I, you know, refrained from eating all of the food on my plate, you know. And it was tough because I was getting judged by both sides, like judged, like, you're not coming to class tomorrow, like you're only doing one class. And then on the other side, it's like, that's your whole life, you're getting so skinny, you look sick, and all this, you know, you're not going to be able to maintain that lifestyle, it's not sustainable, you're not enjoying food, on and on and on. I think while I've gained quite a bit of that weight back, I feel much happier this time around. I mean, I still want to lose the weight. I'm not saying that I'm happy at this, with my body being this size, but I'm not looking at myself, hating myself quite as much, feeling like I don't fit anywhere. Because as I said in a previous episode, that when I got pretty fit, when I was in black spaces, I felt too small, no shape, you know. Then when I was in white spaces or non-black spaces, but typically white spaces, I felt like I was still too big because everyone was a lot slimmer. And I was not big. I was not considered big. And you know, that was really hard because, again, I wasn't just appreciating where my body was and you know, how I got off, you know, blood pressure medication. I wasn't appreciating that. I was still just focused on how I looked and not my health, really, you know, until I was forced to deal with my health. And I ended up getting a blood clot from having the skin removal surgery. And then after taking a course of blood thinners, the blood clots kept coming back, like it just didn't end. And so I had to change my eating habits because vitamin K and the greens impacted if you had a blood clot or not. I lost my way with nutrition because I couldn't do, which I was mostly going green. I couldn't do that anymore. And it was hard to balance eating healthy, working out, and the fact that I was having blood clots, which is a really very serious condition. And I just got out of hand, and I stopped doing class, working out, doing all the things that I did slowly. I dropped things, and the weight was coming back on, but, you know, fairly slowly. I wasn't too scared. I'm like, oh, I'm getting a little curvy instead of just thin. But then it started to get out of control. Then I met you, and I really was like gobbling down, you know, that whole eat, love, pray thing. And so, so here I am back in this space, but with more knowledge about why I need to do what I'm doing from a health standpoint. Yes, the benefits can be how you look, but that's not the most important thing, one. And two, don't be so obsessed and excessive about it. Be consistent, but not obsessive. And just still learning to love myself through that process. You know, I appreciate what I've learned in this journey. I'd love to get off this roller coaster.
We both
done, but here I am, and I'm looking forward to actually jumping back on, and at least, if nothing else, just being consistent about moderate exercise and healthy eating. So how about you and all of your?
Well, for me, I went basically between 240 and 270. That's where I would go back and forth for at least 10 years. One of the things that really was hard was that I started getting into running in my 40s. But the problem is in Maryland, so I would do outdoor running. I can't stand treadmills. I need to be outdoor running. And so in Maryland, with the way the temperatures are and the humidity and the weather, and you basically are able to get out and run in the spring and in the fall. The summers are hot, moist and nasty and mosquitoes and everything else. And the winters are cold and wet and nasty. And so it's really like you've got spring and fall, and I would get out and I would run and I would go to the gym and work out. And so I would get down to around 240. And it's like, okay, now I'm feeling good, but I never really could get beyond that. And then flash forward, I move out to California, and during that move was when the marriage was going downhill. I was ridiculously stressed, not only because my marriage was going downhill, but there was a whole lot of financial things going on. There was a lot of craziness going on. And I started running again. The running was less for fitness than it was emotional. That was the only way I could kind of really keep myself together. And so I was running for endorphins, and I got out there, and I think one of those years on Strava, I ran over 1,100 miles.
Wow.
And it was just, so I started to lose weight, and I got down to 190, which from my heaviest is a 90-pound difference. But I knew when I got down to 190, I was, in fact, I got actually a little bit lower than that. I knew it wasn't sustainable, because the miles that I was putting out there and the little bit that I was eating, I said, there's no way for me to sustain that. And I kept running for a long time, but I started to add some foods back in, and I found what I felt was a comfortable weight, which was roughly 210, 215, which is pretty comfortable for me, and I don't feel really heavy. Now, one of the things that's also important to say is that I never had physical issues brought about by being overweight. So what I mean by that was, even at 280, when I went to the doctor, no high blood pressure, no diabetes scare, none of that stuff. Everything was still fine. My blood pressure was still great. Everything was still great. All my vital signs were still great. I was just way too heavy. And so I didn't have that kicking me in the butt to get myself together. But back moving out here to California, so stressed about all of these things. And this was in 2019. And then 2020 hits with the pandemic. Here I am going through a divorce, trying to also take care of my son, and working where all of my customers were either in Silicon Valley or in the DC area. So everything was kind of weird in terms of my schedule. But I was stressed beyond belief. And I didn't know anybody out here in California. And so I would just go out and run. And I would basically average, 5 to 7 miles in the morning, just to kind of get my head together. Yeah, I started to lose the weight. I felt good about myself. Never really got rid of the gut for whatever reason, but everything else started looking better. I met you, of course, after I'd gone through all, few years past my divorce and the whole 9 yards. Met you, and I was still running when I met you. Mm-hmm. And then I made it through the LA Marathon, not realizing that I had a torn labrum in my hip, that it was really torn. After the marathon, I was thinking, okay, well, I'm going to run a few more marathons. So I went and actually signed up and paid for the Long Beach Marathon. So I was like, okay, well, now that I finished this marathon, now I can work on getting a better time and all this other kind of stuff. And I got back into training, and 7-mile runs became 5-mile runs, became 3-mile runs, became 1-mile runs, became hard to get out of my apartment. And a lot of it was because of my hip. It just got to a point where I couldn't get it to move. And it was so bad. I don't know if you remember, but it was an audible knock that would happen when I would walk. And so I end up getting hip replacement, which was tough. But before that, I had gained probably 30 to 40 pounds because since I couldn't run anymore and I was still stressed, I couldn't get that endorphin rush. And that's one of the things people don't think about in terms of fitness and being able to work out. And I'm sure that was a lot with you as well when you were going through your process, because when you're able to get into the gym and work out and get that endorphin rush, and then when you can't, where do you get it from?
Right.
And for me, you know, the only way I could replace the endorphin rush from running was, you know, key lime pie. And, you know, cookies, cheesecake, whatever the case may be.
Right.
And I put on a good bit of weight prior to my first hip replacement. And then going through that, I said, okay, I had my hip replaced, and I'm saying, okay, I can start to train again. And I probably did kind of go at it too hard, but either way, within 9 months, there was an infection in my hip. They said, well, we can't just go in and replace your hip. We need to put in a temporary and go through these rounds of antibiotics and all of this ridiculousness. And I'm just falling apart because all I want to do is run.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, lifting weights doesn't even do it for me. I need to be out there running. I'm sinking a bit into depression because I can't find something to give me that endorphin rush. So I had the second surgery. And then with that, I really tried to kind of figure out how can I help myself while I'm going through this process, because I'm not going to be able to run anytime soon or maybe ever, but I have to figure this thing out. And I think that's one of the difficult things that people go through on these journeys is figuring out what actually is going to sustain me when I can't do these things. Is that basically what happened to you?
Yes. Being in the gym and sweating. If I did not drip with sweat, I didn't feel like I worked out. And I needed to do that every day. I'm sure, I know for a fact it helped me, you know, mentally and emotionally through things. But I also felt like every day that I missed, every class that I missed meant I might gain that weight back.
Yeah.
And so a lot of me making sure that I was working out 3 hours a day was from fear of gaining the weight back. I got really good at losing weight. I never got good at maintaining it. When I would work out, my workout consisted of weight training 3 days a week. And I would also do cardio, a cardio class called Drenched, think, you know, Taibo basically. I would do that every day, 7 days a week, sometimes twice, sometimes 3 times, on top of the weightlifting, on top of running a 5K. And then eventually I joined a sprint team. Not because I love to run, which I did for a while. I love to run. But because I wanted to, again, look a certain way. And I was told that sprinting would build my butt and thighs. And so I joined a sprint team. And I got really small because I was still doing the cardio, the excessive cardio and running and lifting weights and doing the sprinting. And I got really small for a moment. Then I had to stop because I got injured. I pulled a groin or something. And so I couldn't run for a while. I couldn't do anything for a while, which made me be even more excessive with the diet. So what could I take out? I started taking out fruit. Well, that's healthy for you.
Yes.
There's good things in it for you. But I started taking that out because I was so terrified of gaining any weight. And it just got to a point where I wasn't enjoying anything. I was like, I have to remove this. Got to the point, not saying we shouldn't do this. We should watch our hidden sugar intake.
Yes.
But when you start watching your hidden sugar intake, it is really hard to find anything to eat that you didn't make yourself.
Yes.
So But I said all this to say that, yes, it did help me mentally. It did. It didn't necessarily help me with sleep because I slept about 4 hours a day because the time I would come home from my last workout to the time I'd have to get up and be at the gym at 5 again. I didn't sleep much. I don't even know how I ran and did as much as I did on such little sleep in my 40s.
Wow.
But I did, and I don't see myself going back to that. I spent gobs of money on trainers and nutritionists and different workout classes and different runs and all of these things. The clothes, the shoes, everything had to match, Lululemon, Nike, like it was out of control.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of money, and I would drive out to the valley. And so from work in the South Bay to the valley, it would take me, sometimes almost 2 hours to get out there.
Yeah.
And then a good 30 to 45 to get home late at night. I spent so much time doing that.
Yeah.
So it's time and money and not a whole lot of other things. I was actually even going to leave teaching. I got certified to teach group fitness classes, and I was going to continue with those certifications until all that blood clot issue started, and I realized how much I needed insurance and stability of a job, that I was like, okay, forget it. You're going to continue teaching. But I still tried to maintain that love of fitness and everything. It went away. Now, when I get back out there today, like I've been trying with my friend Mike Keisha, going over to our house and working out. And at first it was really tough. And then it got to a point where like, oh, I enjoyed this and I'm looking forward to it and I feel good afterwards. So it takes a while to get back into that mindset of like, my body needs this.
Yeah.
It's going to take a good 3 or 4 times of working out, and each time you're like, oh my God, I just wish I could stay home. Then eventually you're gonna be like, I can't wait to go work out. Like your body is going to crave it, and you're going to start to see the differences. So that's where I'm at now. I did a silly thing where I was trying not to lose too much weight before the wedding because I wanted to fit in the dress, and some people thought that was crazy. Like, just lose that weight, get it off, and get another dress. Right. But I was afraid to do that. I did lose some, and she did have to take it in quite a bit. And now I'm worried because I'm such a all or nothing person.
Yes. That
things it's hard for me to keep things even. Like the lady said, don't lose more than 5 pounds. Like that's wild to tell me that.
Yeah.
It's hard for me not to gain more than 5 pounds, let alone lose more than 5 pounds. But I decided to just keep it, make sure I'm moving because it's also for cardiovascular health, but not to go drastic where I would lose too much. But once this wedding is over, I am going to be consistent and do this because I feel like I'm getting older, right? Yeah. And I realize the importance of not about how I look, but how I feel, how my body's moving, combating illnesses and things like that. I need to focus on moving and eating for the life I want to live for the next few years and stop just living for that moment so often of a delicious meal. I went back to eating red meat, which is now I feel like I'm on crack because I'm having difficulty breaking myself back off of it after 12 years. But I definitely want to cut way back on it because as I've, shared before, I ended up having the same blockage that my mom has with needing the bypass. So I need to be really careful because I could be going down that same road.
Yeah.
So less fatty food, make sure this is about how I feel and not just how I look, and thinking about what goes on internally and how important it is to be mobile because that can save our lives as we age.
Yeah.
It's really important to be able to still get up from a chair.
Yes.
Simple, very simple things.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think I've grown in understanding that this isn't just about maintaining or trying to get a certain look.
Yeah.
This is about your survival.
Yes.
And how has this journey, brought you to where you are today and your thoughts about fitness?
Well, one of the things that I really remember, and this really gets to me, is this was probably 7-8 years ago. I was getting ready to go. I was still living in Maryland. I was getting ready to go to the gym, And my stepson at the time came in and he said, hey, you know, I see you going to the gym every day and you're working out hard. I got to tell you, but you're still fat. And I thought about it and I was like, you know what? You're right. I am. Mm-hmm. He said, so why do you keep doing it? Mm. I said, what choice do I have? Mm-hmm. And this is one of the things I found in so many things in my life, not just in terms of physical fitness, but in terms of the way I'm trying to mature emotionally and in every other way, is there is constant failure. But what choice do you have? You have to keep pushing.
Right.
You have to keep pushing. And so for me, it's one of those things that I don't really get too down on myself if I keep failing. I get down on myself if I stop trying. And now I'm at a point where I think I've figured a lot of things out. I'm sure I haven't figured all of it out. But in terms of fitness, you know, being able to get out there and not needing the social circle anymore, because when I first moved out here, you know, after COVID started to lighten up a bit and we were able to get into groups, you know, my whole social circle was the fitness community, was the running community. Mm-hmm. And so when I got hurt, I lost track of a lot of those people. But luckily, there was a good number of people who constantly checked in on me and were constantly wanting to make sure I was okay. And I appreciate those people. Yes. And those people are friends of mine to this day. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you had a lot of that, because with all the classes that you were taking, all the drenched and Taibo and all the rest of that kind of stuff, you do end up with a social circle. And so when you get hurt or when you can't work out the same, it's not just about what it's doing to my body. I've lost my social circle.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I completely, feel like I completely, there's two people that I still know and work out with here and there, or maybe three from that time and space. Yeah. But once I stopped going, or even the times that I couldn't go, that was it.
Yeah.
I mean, we were friends on Facebook, and a few people here and there might have reached out in the times that I had blood clots, because I was hospitalized a few times with blood clots. They reached out, but no, if you're not still out there running or at those classes, it's not the same at all.
Yeah.
Not the same at all. So that was hard. Like you said, there was a huge,
yes.
These are people I saw every day and spent so much time with.
Yeah.
And then it kind of just fell apart. I don't know if it was me, it was them, a combination, but you know, just not going to the same spaces. And it is hard hanging around people who don't have that mindset about diet and exercise.
Yes.
Because a lot of us spend times going out to eat, right? Yes. And then people pressure people to eat a certain thing or to have a drink or whatever. And it is difficult. It can be challenging.
Well, it gets easier as you get older.
Absolutely. I do agree with you. As you get older, you don't care as much.
Yeah, it's easier to say, yeah, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
Hey, you guys go right ahead. In fact, I can sit here and watch you, know, and knock yourself out. That's not a problem.
That's true.
And one of the things that people should notice that we didn't talk about the way folks online talk about obesity and talk about health and all of that kind of stuff. And a lot of it is that I don't really care that much, because you have people on both sides of the argument, unfortunately, who have a twisted sense of what's right and what's wrong. And I think it does depend on the person. I've seen too many big people who could outrun you going down the street and who are in great health, but just for whatever reason, they're still big. And I've seen skinny people who could not do a push-up.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And so all of that, just looking at looks and all of that, I think that we really need to start thinking about the emotional health of that person, and kind of being able to encourage people to do what they feel makes them better. And it doesn't have to do with what I think a person should look like, or what I think the workouts I think a person should be doing. Everyone has to choose for themselves, and I'm just not that judgmental. So I really don't care. If you're a good person, you're a good person, but we all struggle. And a lot of those people who talk trash about people who are bigger, they've got struggles with other things. We all struggle with things.
Right. Absolutely.
And so before we start, throwing rocks at everybody else, we need to start looking at ourselves and our own struggles. Absolutely. And because I know I have a lot of struggles, so that makes me not only not judgmental, but it gives me a sense of empathy to really want to help people.
Absolutely. I agree. I feel the same way. And one thing, when I was in the heat of my fitness journey, I made sure that I kept it real. I made sure that I shared.
Yes, you did.
Some people think overshared, and that's fine, but it helped people. I had people all over the world reaching out to me, asking me questions like, in my culture, this is what we eat. But how do I deal with the pressure of the family trying to get me to eat it when, pita is a huge part of our culture.
Right.
Talking to me about that. I had people here in the United States talking to me about how they had food deserts. That I didn't realize that. I was always in a city. So they taught me a lot about why it was difficult to get a hold of some healthy foods. And then I had people who had dental problems. So they had no teeth, and they were asking me what could they do, what kind of smoothies they can make. I mean, it's just unbelievable, amazing. Yeah. I love that piece of the journey. And so I think it's important to be honest about the journey.
Yes.
And let people know it is difficult. It's just a simple thing like eat a little less and move a little more. But to put that, that's not your mindset or your culture. A lot of times I know a lot of people say, well, culturally, this is what we eat. And they feel like they have to have that because of that. And there's so many different reasons why people get kind of stuck and not really moving on their journey in fitness and health. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to break those barriers somehow. You're going to have to step out on a limb. You're going to have to give it a try.
The other thing that I think is important is that now my friends and my circle of people who are into fitness, they really are just encouraging everyone. And so it's not a situation of saying, well, as long as you're running and working out, you can hang out with us. It's about people who reached out to me when I was hurt and making sure that I was emotionally okay. Mm-hmm. And so my friends at Black Men Run Los Angeles, my friends and family at Stronghouse Fitness in Hollywood, I can't thank them enough for being there for me. And they didn't ask me, oh, when are you going to get back out there? It was, how are you doing? Is there any way we can help? Whatever the case may be, having a circle of people who just care about you is critical. Mm-hmm. Really is.
It truly is. It's helpful. It just gives you the energy that it takes to keep going.
Yeah. So as we wrap up this episode, because this is one of those things, because we both had very emotional journeys and are still going through them with health and wellness and all of that. We could go on for hours and I don't want to do that. But we will discuss it again in later podcasts. We also have plans that once we get to video, we have people who also have their own fitness journey who we'll be talking to.
Yes.
And so stay tuned for that as well. Tiffany, you got anything to say before we turn this off?
Well, I'd love to hear if anyone has any insight or just wants to share a piece of their journey. Please do so in one of the different forums that you listen to us in. We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. And so don't forget, of course, before Tiffany reminds you to like, share, subscribe, all those types of things. If we're bringing value to you with these conversations, please let us know, and please let your friends and family know. And we really appreciate your time. And so for Love, Growth, and Narratives, episode 15, I'm Freddy.
And I'm Tiffany.
Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.